In this clip, we're going to learn how to work with the canvas and UI elements. To get started, let's create a UI canvas. Let's go to Create, UI, and Canvas. It's important to know that a canvas must be created in order to create UI for your games. So in this case, you'll see that the canvas is extremely large, and it's best to be able to see it by clicking on 2D. This way you can zoom in and out, and you can pan using your mouse wheel by just clicking and holding. Now the canvas itself is going to be the shape of your editor or the scene view. In this case, my scene view, or excuse me, the game itself is set to this free aspect. And so if I were to set this to, let's say, a 16:9 aspect ratio, and we went to scene, you'll notice that the canvas has changed shape to match that. Typically, whenever you create your UI, it's best to stay at a resolution that you know that you're going to be exporting to. Using the free aspect can be problematic at some times. So I'm going to use the 16:9 for my game view, and in the scene view, that's going to match that. And what we want to do is we want to take a look at the canvas itself. What does it entail and what does it do? To start off, you'll see that the rect transform values are being driven by the canvas itself. And the canvas is using a render mode that is associated with the screen size itself. So the render mode is using screen space, and we are set to overlay. And what this means is that any UI element that is put on the canvas is going to overlay on top of what is going on in the scene. So if we were to click this menu and drop it down, we could go to Camera, and the screen space is going to stay in overlay mode until we actually choose a camera in this place. So if I were to click on Camera, I could choose my main camera. Now you'll notice that the canvas has changed. Now let's take a look at the camera itself. Remember that the camera is pointing downward, and so that's why our canvas looks like it's orienting to that camera. Now if we were to look at this, if we went to 2D, you'll see it's pointing straight down. This is beneficial if we want to have our UI elements look like they are in 3D space. Now in our case, what we would want to do is we would want to stay with overlay. Now you do have the other option of using world space itself, and this is going to orient itself to the camera as well, but this would allow us to tie UI elements to actual 3D objects in the scene. So let's go ahead and switch this to screen space overlay. Now some of these parameters are going to be a little bit more self-explanatory than others. We have this pixel perfect parameter, and what this is going to do is it's going to match the pixels of your UI, and it will match them to the pixels on your screen, making them look more clear. You also have this sort order, and typically whenever you have UI elements that are over the top of one another, you might have some objects or some UI elements that begin to fight. And what that means is that they begin to flicker back and forth because they can't tell which way they need to be set. Now, whenever we start placing things in our canvas, the order in which they are parented to the canvas is going to help determine that sorting order. So when at the canvas, the topmost is going to appear in the back, and then the one underneath that is going to appear on top. And the further you go down in the list, the more top it renders. Now we're also displaying to the main monitor in this case, and you can add any additional shaders to that. And then we have the canvas scaler. And right now we're using the constant pixel size. We could use scale with screen size or constant physical size. What I would like to do is I would like to scale with the screen size itself. Now you could do a reference resolution, in this case 800 by 600, but it might be best if we did something like 1920 by 1080. And that's going to just kind of represent a reference for this. Now you could also say screen match mode, and we can match the width or the height. We can expand or shrink. So let's go ahead and go back to the constant pixel size, because what this is going to do is it's always going to look at what we're doing in the game view. So we have this set to 16:9. We could set it to a scale factor of 1 so that it always matches. And then we have our graphic raycaster, and this just allows us to click on the canvas whenever we play our game. And so if we were to have buttons that were parented and nested in this canvas, we could actually click on them, and Unity would recognize that we're clicking on the button. So let's go ahead and start adding objects to our canvas. To add something to the canvas, it's as simple as going to Create, UI, and then choosing the kind of element that you want to add. Typically, we'll add the canvas first, and then you might add something like a panel. It's important to realize that these are basically just containers. So let's go to our 2D view and back up a little bit. So the canvas is the topmost container, and then inside of that we have this panel. And we can modify the shape of this panel using the Rect Transform tools. Now in the Rect Transform, you can see here that we have a couple of different things. We have our anchors and we have our pivot points, and these are going to be very, very important to us as we start to create these elements. So let's just scale this down a little bit, and then we'll talk about those anchors and pivot points. So to scale it down, we could do it a couple of different ways. We could actually use the scale factor here, but this is actually going to scale the object and then any object that it might be parented to it. This can be helpful for animation. Now, one thing that you'll want to note is that this is also going to change the size of the text or the font, but it's not going to change it from its actual parameters. It's actually going to change it from an image type of factor. And what that means is that things could look pixelated once you start to scale them. So the way that you should scale an object or resize it is by adjusting these corners. So you can always left click and drag a corner, and you can resize this panel. In this case, I would like to do a panel that's going across the bottom. Now I do have snapping turned on, and I can get the width here. So we'll do something right around here to where it matches with that line right here. Now the image that is being used in this panel is represented with this image script component. We're using a background image, and then we're applying a white color to it. You can always modify the color to change it, but I'm going to go ahead and keep it at white for now. So now that we kind of get an idea of how we can modify the width and the height of these objects, as you can see here, what I would like to do now is to talk more about these anchor points and pivots, because they are integral to making sure that these items show up as we see them here in the scene view.